So here's our recording, and we are going to get started with our last section. So. Last piece of the day, and I think we are going to be done in that hour. Coping Skills 101. We're going to talk about what they are, why they matter, and just go over a few tools for your students. Am I sharing my screen?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Screen share. There we go. All right. So like I said, this could be on coping skills. The goal is that these are things that are simple and are going to be helpful for our kids. So over this hour, we are going to define stress, resilience, and trauma, and discuss sort of the context that students are coming into with tutoring, which we're not going to spend as much time on because we've already talked about that in child development. We're going to identify some skills and strengths we already have, and we're going to learn how to adapt coping skills for our work with kids. So let's move on. All right. So I want to hear from a couple of you. I want to hear from Celeste and I want to hear from Karen. What do you already know about coping skills and what do you want to know? So Celeste, can you share what you already, something you already know about coping skills and something you want to know?
Yes, sorry, hold on, let me close my door.
No worries.
Okay, something that I know about coping skills, I actually do use a lot of coping skills in my personal life, which is breathing techniques. And also, we've mentioned it earlier too, journaling is a big thing as well. Sorry, my dog.
No worries.
And then something I would want, like, I know there's so many, and I just would want to learn like how to incorporate them, like, I guess in the moment as well. When I'm like feeling super anxious or, you know, I feel overwhelmed, just like different, because I know there's so many, but I'm used to the ones that I already know, right?
Sure.
So.
And that's a practice, of course.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. And Karen, are you able to unmute or put in the chat what you already know and what you want to know?
Oh, yeah.
All right, yeah, go for it. In the chat.
Not that way. The other thing we can look at is what skills we work on.
There's negative coping and positive coping. And they really help with your inner self-care as well. So it can be a part of that conversation. Yes. And what's something that you want to know that you don't know yet? How to help a student with coping skills that are comfortable with them. All right, yeah. So we'll see if we can bring in kind of how to approach this with students as a part of this presentation. Thank you for sharing. And I'd like to invite you all to share in the chat at any point if there are questions that come up for you or things that you're like, hey, why isn't this in this presentation sketch? Because we may be able to talk about them. So we're going to go into the chat. I had kind of a 3-2-1 strategy for this. So first thing we're going to do, 3, 2, 1, put in the chat, what is stress? First thing that comes up for you when we talk about stress. Headache, Overthinking again? Yeah. Overscheduling. It's one of those things that can cause stress. All right. Physical tension, for sure. I'm glad that you mentioned that. All right. So when we're talking about stress in a psychological perspective, I'm talking about how our body responds, our body and our mind respond to a threat. If you think about this, you know, thousands of years ago, what were the sort of threats that we were experiencing? You know, it would be things like, am I being chased by a tiger? Am I fight or flight? Yeah. Am I being chased by a tiger? Am I in danger? Is there someone attacking me? And you know, your body has to decide, am I going to fight or am I going to run away? Or am I going to freeze, or am I going to try and befriend the fight? So here's the thing, is our brains haven't caught up with the things that we get stressed about nowadays. So you may have a deadline coming up and your brain is having the same response that it would if there was like a tiger chasing you. So you have the tension in your stomach, the tension in your muscles, your heart pounding, emotion or hormones pouring out into your blood, because your brain thinks you're about to face off into this like life or death situation. And the other thing is that a lot of the blood, a lot of the oxygen, all of that is, when you're activated like this, is going towards, you know, your muscles. It's going towards your legs so you can run. It's going towards your hands so that you can make a fist. And less of it is going to your brain, and less of it is going to like your digestive system and all of those other things, because it's like, it's not important. Like, you can digest your food after, you know, you're not eaten by a tiger. So I think it's really important just to mention, this is where that physical element comes from. Same thing with burnout, it affects decision making, it affects being able to sit and be calm, because you're not calm, you're in this really, really tense situation. So that would be kind of our feedback loop with stress. All right. So moving on again, 3, 2, 1. What is trauma? When you hear trauma, what comes up for you? And again, I don't want you to go anywhere that you don't want to go with this. In the chat, what is trauma? Memory erasure, yeah, that can be a thing with trauma. Childhood trauma, childhood memories, painful things that came up. What else comes up? What are the first words for you when I say trauma? Damage. Scary emotions. Thank you. Yeah. Somebody gave a really powerful definition of trauma the first time that I did this presentation, and I think it's better than anything else I can say, which is that trauma is something that's too fast, too hard, and too much. You can't handle it. And I think that's a better way to describe it than like, okay, trauma can be anything from this list, and abuse is a trauma, and war is a trauma, and all of that. No, trauma is too fast, too hard, too much. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a huge amount of evidence that it literally changes the structures in our brain. So your brain focuses more on ways of keeping you safe and this physical connection with the body, and less on, you know, thinking things through and the logic and the decision-making parts of the brain. They're just not as developed because they haven't had to be, you know, you had to protect yourself. So trauma can even be like a group trauma, in terms of like a group that has dealt with discrimination for years and years and years. There can be some group trauma that gets passed down, even in genetics. And a group trauma could also be something like a disaster. So we have all of these different ways. We have individual trauma and we have group trauma. All right, one more. 3, 2, 1. What is resilience? Reflecting and growing from your trauma, moving forward to recover. Yeah, all of those things can be part of it. Let's see. Any other thoughts? First things that come to your mind when I say resilience? Strong-minded. Okay. So here's the deal with resilience is that a lot of times the way that we talk about it can be very simple. It's like, okay, you're tough, you're resilient. You had all these bad things happen in your life and you got through them. And sure, maybe that can be part of it, that you can handle a lot and you have this piece of you that keeps going regardless. But the way that I like to view resilience is actually more complicated than that. It's being able to handle life and bounce back from things in life, and use the resources that you have. So some people have the resource of like family support, or have a really strong, cultural practice that helps them get through difficult times, and they've learned to get through those difficult times. For some people, maybe it is kind of this idea that they've got toughness. So it's about resources, and we've all got those different resources, those different strengths that get us through difficult times in life. Otherwise, we wouldn't all be here at this point. But so that's how we're going to talk about resilience, is that, having different resources. So here's the deal. Our kids develop a lot of these skills at school, and they use them through practice. If you think about things like social skills, SEL, and then they also develop them with more knowledgeable others, like Dana was talking about, maybe at home. But can you think of any ways that COVID has impacted this that you would share? What's one way that COVID could impact that at school or at home? And I actually want us to share out loud this time, so I'm going to call on Callan.
It's hard because there's a lot that you can notice with your children, and some of them literally just sit there and put their heads down.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to talk to you at all.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they're just used to the isolation.
Used to isolation, for sure. And let's see, let's do one more share out. How about Karina?
Can you rephrase the question?
Absolutely. So I talked about kids learning their, emotional skills and resilience at home, with family and stuff, and then also with school, getting to develop these skills and learn. What's one way that you think COVID would impact that?
I don't know how to word it, but definitely kind of a fall behind in skills,
Mm-hmm.
because they were home for so long, and then parents were in charge of them being of their education and their socializing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kids have kind of fallen behind emotionally, and just how to voice their stuff. I know something that I noticed in my classroom is that all of them get really overwhelmed when it gets loud, but none of them were taught how to be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way that they voice their frustration, their excitement, their what have you, is just being loud, which for kids isn't out of the ordinary. But in classroom settings, you really have to learn how to kind of hone that in. And because they haven't been in classrooms, they don't know how to not do that. You know what I mean? You're not going to tell a kid to be quiet in their own house because they're in their house.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you make a really good point about, that adults are the ones who teach these skills, that more knowledgeable other. And we can think about ways that this pandemic has affected adults too. I mean, things like employment, things like finances, even just the uncertainty of this time or being isolated from your own social circle. Like that kind of gets passed on to kids too. I mean, I'll share, like, even though mentally I was doing okay at the start of the pandemic, it's still, regardless of how you feel about the coronavirus and how seriously you feel you need to take that, it came with a huge life change, and it was for a lot of people too fast, too hard, too much. I was doing mentally okay, but my body was like not happy. I started developing tremors in my hands around April of 2020, because it's like there's something here and my body's trying to keep me safe even though it's invisible. And I think kids have picked up on a lot of that. I would 100% say, even if it's not like everyone develops PTSD from this, we have gone through a group trauma, and that really affects people's ability to cope and ways that they've learned to cope. So I'm really glad that you've been able to share those examples. And even something as, you know, like grief and losing someone in the pandemic that you would not have lost otherwise can really affect people emotionally. So thank you for all speaking to that. All right, so moving forward, I want to have you share in the chat this time, and I know I'm keeping you on your toes, unmuting versus sharing in the chat, but just really quickly, what's one way that you handle stressful situations, and how did you learn to do that? And I will do it too.
Yes.
Disconnecting emotionally and speaking curtly, taking a deep breath, looking at the possible, learned it from college, there you go. Using coping skills you have, telling yourself you're here in the present moment. I am so happy to hear that you all have these skills, or that you're learning to develop these skills. And I will say we all had to learn them somewhere. And so we have this cool opportunity to be able to share them with these kids because they haven't always gotten this, or maybe they got some stuff from home in terms of like family support, but not necessarily, oh, how do I handle this emotion that's stuck in my body and my heart's pounding and all of that. Because a lot of people don't know that. So we're just adding to the resources that they have, helping them to become more resilient. And yeah, sometimes you learn how, sometimes the opposite happens and you learn to handle stressful situations in ways that are not good for you. For me, I used to isolate a lot and not tell anyone what was going on. And then it would just kind of explode. So I didn't know healthy ways to handle things. So we're gonna keep talking about healthy ways to handle things. And we all have examples of self-care as well. So I'm glad that we use these other coping skills. These are really, really constructive coping skills. And also, I think sometimes the way we handle stressful situations, and I'd like you to share out if this is your experience, would be to kind of distance yourself from the situation, do something else, talk to someone else, because you got to get away from it. Does anybody else do that? Yes. All right. Thanks, Celeste. So that is actually the most common type of coping skill, would be distraction. And it works really well, right? Because then you're able to focus on something else, get in a calm place of mind, and then go back to the problem. So things like puzzles or listening to music or watching a good movie, or going for a drive for a lot of adults can all be examples of that. What do you think is one challenge that might come up if your only type of coping skill is distraction? What happens if you're not able to get to that distraction? If you have no time to draw or listen to music or watch a movie, and the problem is still going on and you're still really overwhelmed.
So that one is, and I know how hard it is.
Callan.
Yes.
Yeah. What happens if your only
Um,
skill is distraction?
Well, in my case, I just if I don't have anything to physically distract me, I try to think differently.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have like different parts to ourselves. And so
Mhm.
I allow like a different mentality to come out if I'm going through like something. So if I have like some students are being disrespectful to me, instead of, being able to be like, okay, you know what, they're having a bad day kind of thing. I'm more
Mhm.
like, let's tackle this together. So I just switch up my mindset every so often. So I guess being mindful would be that.
Yeah. And it also sounds like maybe it's a piece of emotional awareness. So if your only skill was, okay, I got to distract myself, I got to get out of this classroom, but you can't leave the classroom because you're, you're the tutor right now and you're needed, that could be really difficult, right? Like, oh, I need to go take a walk and I can't take a walk and I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really does feel like that.
Right? The reason that I mentioned that in particular is that distraction is probably the most common skill that the kids are going to have. Okay, I'm really, really mad, so I want to watch a YouTube video right now, or stuff like that, even if they're not naming it as like, this is my coping skill, because of course they're not. That's not how kids talk. So if they can't distract themselves because they're still in the session and they're still overwhelmed and all of that, they need some other tools on their belt, things to get through these moments. And I love all of the skills that you guys have talked about. Those are really, really great to use with kids. So some of these that I'm going to talk about might be review, or you might be able to put your own spin on them. So other skills would be things like self-soothing, using the 5 senses, doing an opposite action. Sometimes, trick yourself into feeling something different because you're in a different kind of a moment. Emotional awareness, learning how to identify and express feelings. Mindfulness, centering and grounding yourself in the present moment. And let's talk about some pretty simple ways to do those. So first is grounding exercises. And you mentioned grounding exercises, Celeste. What are some, it was Karina, you mentioned grounding. Can you give an example of grounding that you do?
I'll tap my chest, my fingers to my chest, to the center of my chest.
Oh, awesome. So like that physical element.
Yeah, or if I have access to like a corner, I'll wrap my arms around myself and then push into that corner.
Nice. Do you know the butterfly hug?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, cool. You're gonna like that one. All right. So grounding exercises a lot of times would be mindfulness. They're helping you be aware of the present moment, and they've got a physical component. And then someone else mentioned breathing. Who was it that mentioned that they had some breathing exercises?
I did.
All right. Can you share one of your breathing examples?
Yes, I just did this actually with my therapist the other day. She had us take in like huge deep breaths, like from counts like 3. Inhale as long as you can until you feel like you can't inhale anymore, and then slightly like cough once you feel like you can't inhale anymore, and then exhale very deeply. So just keep doing that. Repeat. How do you say it? Repeatedly?
Repeatedly, yeah.
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 And there's like different ones, like there's a 3-3-3, 7-7-7. Or she also said like trace your hand around, or trace your finger around your hand. As you go up, you inhale. As you go down, exhale. So
Ooh, I'm keeping that one. I actually had not heard that one before, and that is fantastic. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and we're gonna go over a couple of these because I kind of want you to be able to see. But here's the thing with breathing that I just want to have be clear for everyone is that when you're doing these sorts of exercises, one of the most important things is to be breathing out more than you're breathing in. And that has to do with what I was talking about with stress and with sensing a threat and all of that. If you're breathing in, your body's saying, oh, I got all this oxygen, you know, I'm ready, I can activate, I can do whatever I need to do to survive. When you're breathing out, you're telling your brain, hey, we're not in danger right now. We have the time to breathe out, we have the time to rest, we have the time to digest. And so that's physically gonna help you to start to calm down. And so any sort of breathing exercises that you do with kids, you wanna have that piece of it and make sure that they're breathing out. So one way to do it might be blowing, like pretending like you're blowing bubbles and you're blowing through a little straw and having them change the shape of their mouth. My favorite breathing exercise ever is five finger candles. So pretending that each of your fingers has a flame on them and then blowing them out. Because it's a really quick thing. It'll already start to distract you and have you think about a different feeling, you know, the coolness on your fingers, the blowing out, all of that. So that's one that's really useful. Another one, this is gonna look silly, but I'm still gonna do it with y'all. One that I was taught is ocean breaths. So breathing in. Oh my gosh, can you hear me now? Can any of you hear me?
yeah, I could hear you.
Okay, so there may be a connection issue. This is gonna be recorded, so you'll be able to, if there's anything that you missed, you'll be able to check later. So one thing might be ocean breaths, you know, taking a breath in and then breathing out like an ocean wave, like. And I know that sounds really, really weird. And it might be that some kids think that that's weird, but that's the sort of thing that, like, you know, you're feeling something different. You feel that vibrate in your chest. You feel the difference. With kids, you know, personalization, I think, is really, really powerful. So being able to do something like, okay, we can breathe like Darth Vader and then make sure that they're breathing out more than they're breathing in. Or we're gonna breathe like dragon breath. Something that maybe connects to their interests may really help with them. So you mentioned, how do you bring these in for kids? And I would say one way is to say, hey, can I show you something that works for me? And then start to personalize it for them so it'll stick in their head. Maybe you have a kid who's really into Pokemon. Maybe you have a kid who's really into, gosh, what are kids into these days? Frozen, and it can be like, oh, these are my ice breaths. I don't know, that's a really weird example. But there's different things that you could do depending on your kids. With older kids, they may not buy into the, oh, it's dinosaur breaths, it's bubble breaths and stuff as much, because, you know, we're trying to get their buy-in. But you could think of it like these are trainings or reps for your brain and your body. You could compare it to an activity that they like. You know, soccer, you have to do drills. Maybe these are drills for your brain. Or tie it to music, you know, breathing out to the beat of a song that you like. That might work better for older kids with these breathing exercises. And like I said, there's a million. I appreciate those of you who shared some of your favorites. I've also got a PDF of like 13 more that I've written out on the drive in the cheat sheet folder. So if you're ever looking for new ideas, I think it's good to keep a couple of these on your belt, the ones that you like, and be able to do them with kids, either as a group or individually when they need to kind of physically deactivate. Going back to sharing my screen. The other simple one here would be a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is for crisis situations and mindfulness and distracting. This is like if you are so in your emotions and you need to get out of those and get back to the present place. So a lot of times it works well for things like panic attacks or flashbacks or those things. If you have kind of a consistent and a calm place. to create that awareness. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 would be name 5 things that you see around you. Name 4 things that you hear. Name 3 things that you can feel physically. So maybe like the tag of your shirt or the feel of your shoes or your bottom in the chair. 2 things you smell, and then 1 thing you taste, even if that's just the inside of your mouth. And you go through those step by step. And it's just kind of a methodical way to start that grounding process and get into, you know, a more think things through kind of a mindset. So again, that example of changing mindset. You could do this in different ways for different students. Maybe, okay, let's find something in the room that's every color of the rainbow. It's about awareness of your surroundings. So if you get nothing else from this presentation, I would recommend learning some sort of breathing technique that you can personalize, and the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for students who are really, really up in that kind of crisis and need your help. Any questions about any of that so far? The way that I see these, by the way, and I should have said this earlier, is that it's not necessarily going to do like the work that therapy would do in terms of let's figure out the triggers and let's figure out how to make them not triggers anymore. But I do think it's valuable in that it's like first aid. Just like you know how to put a Band-Aid on someone, just like you know how to put ice on a bruise. This is like mental first aid and emotional first aid. So if you can think about it in that way, and really teach them, hey, this is what we do when we're struggling. It can be powerful, especially if it's coming from that mentor and that place of trust. All right. Another type would be self-talk and self-soothing. This can look a lot of different ways, but I think it's big to learn how to be kind to yourself and be like your own best friend. So one way that we can do this is through learning, teaching students how to give positive self-statements. We can really model this when we have our culture of error in our classroom and we, you know, say, hey, you know what, I'm glad you made that mistake because we're both learning, or there's no mistakes, there's just happy accidents. Those sorts of things. Or saying, if someone says, I can't do this, you know, being able to challenge that and say, you know what, I think you can't do this yet. Because then you can help them start to have that healthy dialogue with themselves. Another way you could do this would be to display it in the room. What are some things that you can say to yourself when you're frustrated? And it might just be as simple as saying you're frustrated and that's okay. Or you're working really hard and I'm proud of you. I think being able to say these things to ourselves is really, really hard. A lot of times when I talk about this with people, they start to tear up because a lot of us don't have this. And so being able to build it at this young age is powerful. Apart from that, one way that you can really tap into that resilience that they already have, if you know that they've got really supportive people in their life, like a grandma or a dad or a friend, you know, what would that person say? You can ask them, because chances are they're going to be nicer to that person than they would be to themselves. And same thing, like, hey, well, what if one of your friends was going through this? What would you say to them if they were having a hard time? They may be able to say something kinder, and then you can be like, well, you're going to be your friend, so can you say that to yourself too? And these are things that you can also practice, you know, at the beginning of an SEL day. Maybe let's just practice this. So that would be one example. And then lastly, and I'm going to unshare my screen again because I want to show you this one. Has anyone ever heard of either the butterfly hug or EMDR?
Nope.
Cool. Okay. I love when you haven't heard of things because I get to share them, and that is very exciting. Okay, so EMDR it's kind of complicated, but basically it's a form of therapy for people who have been through extreme trauma, where things have been too fast, too hard, too much all the time. And it involves kind of activating the different parts of your brain at different times. So that's a fancy definition. What I'm going to show you is the butterfly hug, which is based off of the principles of EMDR. And it's a physical grounding strategy and self-soothing strategy. So what you do is you have your hands up and you cross your thumbs over, one over the other, and you put them over your chest. And you just tap back and forth, like left, right, left, right. And you do it for a little while you're breathing. And one, it's kind of like giving yourself a hug. It also engages both sides of your brain. And the thing is, this is a strategy that has been used with folks in refugee camps. It's been used for hurricane survivors because it's this simple, easy thing that you're able to do. You can also tap back and forth, side to side on your knees. And it's got this rhythm to it. The thing that people have noticed is that that rhythm is really similar to things like across cultures. When parents rock their kids, that's what they do. They go back and forth. And so it's kind of being able to give that physical comfort to yourself. I have found if I do this too much, I get sleepy. So you might want to be aware of that with students. But when they're in that place where heart's pounding, stomachs, nauseous, all of that, yeah, just have, let's tap back and forth. Let's do it for 2 minutes. And then let's go back. Let's do our breathing. Let's do all of those things. It's just another tool to have on your tool belt. So, all right, cool. And there's a video. I can send you a video if you ever want to see how to do that. But that's another just piece of self-soothing. All right, we're almost done. I think we're going to be done by 12:30, which I'm very excited about. So I'm sharing, present. All right. Another piece that I think is just useful to know is I think having the idea of a distress signal or hey, I need to stop kind of a piece. We are really, I think a huge strength of ours is being able to go and connect to students and have those one-on-ones and say, hey, I really care about you and all of that. And it's also important to notice that like not all students are going to lean into that and say, thank you, I feel safe. Some are going to shut down when we try to connect, put the heads on the desk or turn away or all of that. And that's okay. That can be due to things like trauma. That could just be unfamiliarity with you if you're still kind of in the creeper stage, we like to call it, of mentoring. And it could be for a million other reasons. Tomorrow, or not tomorrow, Monday, we're going to be talking about disability and access for those of you who haven't gone to that training. And it's worth noting that different individuals with disabilities, for example, kids with ADHD or autistic kids might sort of retreat and not trust you or not want to connect in that way. They may connect in other ways. So this is okay. And the thing is, trying to push harder can make students more resistant, and it's not helpful for every student. It kind of corners them. So with all of these things, I believe it's important to say that children have the right to set boundaries and have choice and give consent. So one thing you may be able to do in your classroom would be to just set up a code word or visual, like red light or SOS, and have that be a simple way of saying, I need help or I need space. Because students aren't going to say, I feel frustrated and therefore I need you to leave me alone. They're going to, just kind of shut down because they don't have the language for that yet. So being able to, I like red light, yellow light, green light a lot. Green light, I'm fine. Everything's good. Yellow light, be careful. Red light, stop. That could be something where you tap into their prior knowledge. So that would be kind of what I say on distress signals. You could even make it like a physical thing to do. If, cross your arms over your chest, this is a block, don't come to me right now. If, you have a student who needs that. I just think it's important to recognize this. And lastly, we talked about emotional awareness. Here's one more emotional awareness skill that doesn't always require words. You don't have to specifically say, oh, I feel jealous right now, or I feel guilty right now, because those are complicated emotions that adults don't even understand a lot of the time. And it's going to be even harder for kids. So here are sort of 4 zones that you could use as a check-in. You have blue for low energy, which could be sad, tired, sick, bored. Green, in control, they're focused, they're ready, they can go, they can get through the day. Yellow would be like, I'm a little out of control. Maybe that's worried, excited, or silly. And then red would be like out of control, angry, yelling, hitting, panicked, like the emotions are up to 11. So this could be a tool that you use in the start of your day. Maybe have students pick what color zone they're in. You could have them move around the room. You could have them hold up a little card and have, if you have markers or colored pencils, and have them color the dot that they're feeling, and maybe check in with the ones who are yellow and are red and see like, hey, do you want to talk about it or do you not want to talk about it? Even if you haven't solved the issue, you've still offered them the chance, you've still connected with them and respected their boundaries. So that could be one way that you could use these 4 zones. You could use them a lot of different ways. Another one would be like thumbs up, sideways, thumbs down, and then check on the people who are sideways and thumbs down. But I like this one because it has the color, and that can work well as a visual aid. And also they don't have to know exactly how they're feeling. They just have to kind of know the zone. So that concludes this presentation. I'd like to have a little bit of share time and have you guys share, 3 of you share takeaways, new things you've learned, and then 2 like action steps, things you might try in a session, and then 1 further question if you have it. So does anybody want to share, or shall I call on you?
I can share.
Go for it. So what was one
Um,
takeaway or new thing that you learned?
Breathing exercises, because I don't really use them.
Nice.
I just simply do stretching.
Stretching works too. Stretching is a
Yeah.
great way to physically like get your body to be doing something else. I love that. But I'm glad that you learned that new thing.
Actions or steps that I can take. I guess I can start. Well, since we're almost toward the end of the tutoring season, I think it for some of the other kids who are doing like the 4th and 5th graders at my site,
Mhm.
they'll be starting on like their finals and like promotion. So I could start probably using some of those techniques with them.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that. And do you have any further questions or points of curiosity, things that you want to know more about with this?
As of right now, no.
All right, cool. Let's see. I'd like to hear from a couple more people. A takeaway and an action step and a question.
I could go.
Go for it.
I really like the butterfly hug you were mentioning. I actually was doing it when you were telling us about it. So I feel like I could use that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Action steps I can take in regards to the children that we are with. I was thinking to myself, during an SEL lesson, we could just all do this together, and like practice different, like breathing techniques or,
Yeah.
motions, and do that butterfly hug and incorporate it with the other tutors. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that
And
would
any questions or points of curiosity? Things you want to build on?
Not right now. If I do, I will
Cool.
let you know.
All right. What was it like for you to do that butterfly hug since you were trying it?
It was good. It's my first time, like I said, but I want to try to incorporate that more.
That's
So,
awesome. I'm glad that I could share that one with you.
yes, I was
All right.
thinking of it being, sorry.
No,
I was
go for it.
thinking of it being like something very different, but just that simple gesture it was good.
I'm glad. And let's do one more. Takeaway, action, and question. Can I hear from you, Karen? It's cool if you need to do it in the chat.
Yes. what is the third one? There's like oh, there we go. So a new thing that I learned, just like I think it was Celeste talking, or the person that was talking before me,
The butterfly hug.
yeah, the butterfly hug. I think that's a really good coping skill that I could teach the kids and myself as well. I know
Yeah.
it would help lower like anxiety, stress, and all that. And I obviously I'm in college, so I do need that.
Yeah.
And an action step I can take is actually doing the coping skills so I could get better at it and help other kids as well. And then a further question, I don't have one. Or
Cool.
like, yeah. So
Okay.
that's
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So I'm gonna let y'all go because we definitely have a staff meeting. And I want you to be able to take, your 2 minutes and get some water and all of that. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or anything comes up about these things, or you're like, hey, I tried using this in session and something didn't quite work. I want to be able to support you all as a part of the coaching team. Thank you for coming to these trainings. I have marked down everyone who was here. I appreciate you all. Take those 2 minutes and I'm going to take mine and we will go over to the all staff meeting. All right.
I have a question for the staff.
Yeah, what's up?
Um, we could, because I can't find it in my email, but I think one of my other tutors said that in our calendar.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, the all staff meeting link should be in your calendar.
Oh, okay, never mind. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Do y'all want me to just post it in the chat right now?
Sure.
Because I've got my calendar pulled up.
I had my lead message me during your